happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And why are these people smiling? Well, history was made across the United States in the elections as Trumpism was repudiated and transgender candidates made historic breakthroughs.
Unbelievable. So we're going to spend a lot of time going through a lot of the people who got elected. Some you know about, some you may not. We'll bring you up to date.
And we'll give you links to all the others.
And we will remember one of the first out gay elected officials, Ed Flanagan, first elected to statewide office. He has died at the age of 66 in Vermont.
And we also mourn the loss of the documentarian Debra Chasnoff. She was the first person to thank her same-sex partner when she won an Oscar, and she was the producer of the great film It's Elementary. She's died at the age of 60.
Yeah. Despite the election results, Republicans are advancing their tax bill that will devastate us and judicial nominees dedicated to denying our rights. And I just found a hidden little trick in the tax bill that you're really not going to like.
I'm sure. More bad news.
Yep.
A trans woman was murdered in Georgia, and in Nevada, a 14-year-old was killed by his father for being gay.
I want to give credit to Andrew J. Humm, who knew long before many of us just how bad Kevin Spacey was. Kevin Spacey,
yes,
is
thank you.
Now facing an avalanche of men accusing him of sexual harassment and rape.
And we're going to review Julie Taymor's production of M. Butterfly with Clive Owen and a play called Junk at Lincoln Center about Wall Street corruption. But we start with the elections.
Yes, we do.
I mean, it was victories from coast to coast. And, you know, as we said, Republicans were on the run in this election, and yet they're going to continue while they hold power to do as much damage as they can. They don't seem chastened by this.
We can get into that. I am not entirely convinced that this election won't change some of that. First of all, I'd like to think it'll put a stiffer spine in Democrats and encourage them to manifest progressive tendencies on the grounds that the election certainly supports that,
yes.
And maybe put a little fear into the heart of Republicans who see that if they do go along with this wacko agenda of Trump and Steve Bannon, that maybe that's not a winning formula for them.
Right.
So
yes, but you know, and yesterday most of the news was, you know, the big races were the governorships in New Jersey and in Virginia, and other races down ballot. But a lot of attention was given to Danica Rome, who won a election to the House of Delegates in Virginia. There she is while she's running. And she defeated this guy, Robert Marshall, who is, you know, famous for proclaiming himself the chief homophobe in the House of Delegates. He introduced all this anti-LGBT legislation constantly. That's him. That's Danica with the governor-elect, Ralph Northam.
Yes, bigot Bob Marshall, who wrote the anti-trans bathroom bill in Virginia.
He refused to refer to Danica as by her right pronouns because he said, "I never flunked biology and I understand the laws of nature." Well, there's some new laws in politics that people are learning. This guy was a 25-year incumbent.
Exactly. So what a milepost that an out trans woman could win a seat in the state legislature against the most famously bigoted 25-year incumbent in Virginia.
Things are changing.
Mind-blowing.
And, well, things don't just happen in politics. The Victory Fund, which tries to elect openly LGBT candidates, alone put $200,000 into this race. So that's a huge investment, and that's what has to happen if we are to come.
Well, and perhaps the other thing that has to happen is the way that Danica ran her race, which was laser focused on local issues and refusing.
Mainly traffic congestion on Route 28 or something like that. I
Yes.
mean, she wouldn't stop talking about it.
Yes, even in her victory speeches.
So you better fix that, Danica, or you're not getting reelected.
Well, she certainly infrastructure is something that Trump promised and has not followed through on and isn't even talking about. So I certainly
Well, that
think
was just to get elected.
I think
Like bringing us together.
Look, he's the builder who should understand that infrastructure is important, but all he builds are fancy hotels and, you know, cheesy apartment buildings.
Right.
So, so maybe he doesn't understand roads and bridges and tunnels. But she ran a brilliant, relentless race, refused to be taken into the gutter, and had a huge, astonishing victory.
And so not only did Ralph Northam hold the seat, the governorship of Virginia, they have to run, they only get one term there. You know, hold it for the Democrats, but the House of Delegates there is on the edge in terms of turning Democrat. And
from a 66-34
Yep.
Republican majority.
well, yes, and we still only have about, you know, what, 15 or 16 governorships in the whole country. But they also elected in Virginia an African-American lieutenant governor, Justin Fairfax.
Yep.
And he's not even the first African-American. The first, of course, was Doug Wilder. And then in New Jersey, where Phil Murphy was elected, Democrat for governor, an African-American named Sheila Oliver was elected lieutenant governor. So, you know, a lot of breakthroughs across the board for all kinds of diversity.
Well, yes, and Danica was not the only transgender person elected to office in the country this week.
Right.
Next up, Andrea Jenkins, an out trans woman, African American, elected to the Minneapolis City Council.
And they are saying this is the first out trans person of color elected to any office in the United States.
Well, then we got word of
that woman in Boston.
the woman in Boston, but she was not out when she was elected. And
Back
when
in, where was it? It was many
25 years ago.
Yeah.
And when she was outed, she then lost her next election. So, although she is still running for office. But
And then in Erie, Pennsylvania. Now, you know, Pennsylvania is a state where we don't even have a statewide LGBT rights bill, but a guy named Tyler Titus has won a seat on the Erie School Board.
Yep.
First trans person elected in Pennsylvania. He's 33, father of 2 boys, and is a licensed professional counselor. And then in Flemington, New Jersey, we don't have a picture here, but we just heard that Betsy Driver won a seat on the Borough Council, the second intersex person elected in the world, she says.
we were following a couple of races in Georgia. Kathy Woolard, an out lesbian, was running for mayor in a big multi-person primary. The top 2 vote getters will end up in a runoff. She came in 3rd, but very
close,
respectably.
a close third,
Yes,
yeah.
did better than expected, and very popular candidate. Alex Wan, who we do have a picture of, is an out gay man running for city council president in Atlanta. He was the top vote getter in his primary race, and he will be in the runoff for city council.
We haven't finished
president.
with transgender candidates. In Palm Springs, Lisa Middleton won as council member in Palm Springs, the first transgender person elected to a non-judicial office in the state of California.
And there were 2 open seats there. The other was won by a bisexual woman. The entire 100% city council of Palm Springs is now LGBT. Everyone.
It's like West Hollywood.
No, West Hollywood didn't have an entirely LGBT city council, I don't think, ever.
I thought it was a gay town.
Palm Springs has a 100% LGBT city council now.
All right, let's go to Seattle, where Jenny Durkin has become Seattle's first out lesbian mayor. She's also the first woman mayor since 1928. Now, we haven't had a woman mayor ever in New York, and there was a closeted woman running in New York, but Bill de Blasio was reelected as the Democrat overwhelmingly.
She wasn't closeted about being a woman.
No,
she was a closeted lesbian.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I just said closeted.
Yeah, I know. I just trying to be clear.
Yes.
For our
yes,
viewers.
and I'm not the one who has the avalanche of complaints against me. It's Kevin Spacey. All right.
I thought you were going to say it was me.
And then Charlotte, North Carolina has their first female African American mayor, Vi Lyles. So, and that was a person supported by the LGBT community.
Absolutely, and we were a little concerned about Charlotte because of everything that's gone on in North Carolina the last couple of years. But the progressive candidate won, and huge congratulations to our old friend Sean Strube, who has won the mayor's race in Milford, Pennsylvania.
Now, Sean was the editor and founder of Pause Magazine, a long-term survivor of HIV, big HIV/AIDS activist and political activist, and he won. This is a town of a population of 1,000. Sean tells us a lot of Trump voters there, but he won. I don't know how he won, but he won.
Well, because he owns a local business there. He owns a bed and breakfast. He's been in the town for a long time. He comes back and forth to New York some. He ran for Congress years ago in New York State. Came close in that race, but didn't win. But now he has been elected mayor of Milford, Pennsylvania.
And a great result in Maine, where the people of Maine overcame their opposition of the Republican governor, and they voted to expand Medicaid there for the entire state. So that's a breakthrough.
So lots of good results. Shock across the nation at these results.
Well, this business of curbing prescription drug prices in Ohio failed.
Yes.
But that was brought by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation from California, who spent $17 million of AIDS
to kill
money.
It, right?
No, to pass it.
No, okay.
The pharmaceutical company spent $200 million to kill it.
Yes.
And they managed to scare people away from it. But AIDS Healthcare Foundation, I'm always a little wary of their proposals.
Well, some of their stuff is great and some isn't. You can get a full rundown of LGBT candidates and their races and results around the country. There was another guy running for city council in Minneapolis who barely lost. So there are some mixed results, but great wins across the board. Go to victoryfund.org. That's the organization, as I hope you know, that supports LGBT candidates around the country. They have the results on most races, and you can get an up-to-date picture there.
And it was good to see what happened in Washington State, where a Democrat named Monk Dingra won a state Senate seat, and
flipped
the state legislature there to
Democrat.
Democrat, yeah.
Yep.
She's from Redmond.
Yep.
And so again, this was a total repudiation. This was energized voters on the Democratic side,
yep,
who may have set out 2016, who were not, who either thought Hillary can't lose, I don't need to go to the polls, everybody tells me she's going to win, whatever. But they were energized. And
well, here's a different angle on that. I think this election, brought out more voters. In Virginia, there were 5 to 6% more voters than there were, I don't know if it was 4 years ago for the last governor's race, maybe. But women in particular, 60% of women in Virginia voted for Ralph Northam. Men, 48% for Northam versus 50% for Gillespie. But women put it over the top. Women waited outside in the rain in long lines. This is the Women's March to the Polls now.
Yeah.
And I think people are relentlessly committed to this. And the next one, should you be keeping score, is Alabama in a month.
December the 12th, they have a special election to fill the seat of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, who was our Attorney General. And this is Roy Moore versus Doug Jones. Doug Jones is the Democrat. Roy Moore is the monster.
He is, the notorious Roy Moore. Now,
and the last poll had them tied at about 42 each.
I think these results will encourage the Democratic Party to put a lot of money and support into Alabama for Doug Jones.
And as you pointed out, Roy Moore has lost 2 statewide races, but those were in primaries.
But they were gubernatorial races, they were statewide races.
Yes.
And he could lose again, especially if more people go to the polls.
And a little bit further out, you have a chance to vote for or against Kim Davis. She has filed for re-election
yes, she has.
as county clerk there.
In Kentucky.
According to her lawyer, who's from
Kentucky.
the Alliance Defense Fund, she loves her job and she loves the people. She just hates gay people. No, he didn't say that last part, but that's pretty evident.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's.
Well, should we talk about the loss of Ed Flanagan?
Well, we have one other political thing here we should deal with.
Well, of course, the horror of the week was the mass church shooting, which you all know about.
In Texas.
And Gays Against Guns had already planned to go down to Washington to the Senate Hart office building and protest. So they went through with their protest, and it took on new meaning in light of this absolutely horrendous thing, which is indicative that, even when we have some halfway decent laws to protect people from, us from these people getting guns, they get them anyway.
Gays Against Guns, in the face of our experience, which is that nothing beats the gun lobby on anything,
right,
have been heroically committed to this issue and to fighting for a long time.
And even Senator Cornyn from Texas is talking about background checks, which weren't being talked about before.
And smaller magazines, so that
God.
you can't shoot 30 bullets at a time, maybe only 15.
There's no excuse for
well,
any
there's
of
no
it.
excuse for a guy who's stomping his child's head
From owning a gun.
Yes.
Forget about buying a gun, owning a gun. It ought to be a felony for a person like that to own a gun.
Well, he should have spent
and if you
more
don't
than
like it, tough.
Should have spent
That's
more than
gotta
a
stop.
year in jail also.
Right.
But thank you to Gays Against Guns for doing a die-in at the Hart Senate office building. 7 people arrested.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Well, we have a couple of losses to talk about this week, which we're sad about. Ed Flanagan has died. He was 66. He was the first openly gay person elected to a statewide office in the country, I guess.
Yep.
He's from Vermont. He's the former auditor of accounts and was a state senator and had a pretty terrible accident, I guess it was, a car crash.
2005, a car crash, and this death at 66, 12 years later, is attributed in part to the after effects of that
very
car
passionate
crash.
and very progressive.
And a very nice guy. I think I met him around, Democratic conventions.
You were a delegate once.
I was.
I was too.
Yeah. And he was a good guy, and he did good things. Debra Chasnoff was a documentary filmmaker. She made, first of all, a short documentary called Deadly Deception, General Electric, nuclear weapons or whatever. And that won the Academy Award for about 20 years ago for Best Short Documentary. And she got up on stage and thanked explicitly her female partner and was the first person to do that at the Oscars.
Right. Despite that parade of homosexuals over the years who were getting awards.
Exactly.
As we know from the Scotty Bowers movie.
So she was stunning in her forthright courage, and she made one of my all-time favorite documentaries, It's Elementary.
Yes.
Some years after that, not that many years after that.
She went into the elementary schools and let
in New York,
children talk about gay issues, LGBT issues,
well, she filmed teachers talking to their students about gay issues and being out to them and talking openly, very much like the work we did around that time or before
at the Hedrick Martin Institute.
And it was a fabulous documentary. It's still relevant today. If you are interested,
it's charming.
It is.
And it's moving.
It's heartwarming. And if you're interested in this kind of work, if you want models for how to have this conversation in schools, at home, anywhere, It's Elementary.
She did that with Helen Cohen.
Yes.
Right, and they did other documentaries about diversity in the schools and how to handle that, which is something we desperately need now.
Yeah.
With all the bullying going on.
And It's Elementary is still relevant to that work today and can be used in any school.
Well, when they had the hearings against bullying at the New York City schools last week, I mean, Danny Drum, who was the out gay chair of the Education Committee, hammered home, and he's to the chancellor who was sitting there, you need to give permission to the teachers to say lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. You know, they have to know that they're not going to get punished if they do, that they're going to be praised if they do. We have to talk about it. If we can't talk about it, we can't make any progress on this.
30 years ago, we were doing that in the schools, 30 years. And having the kids chant lesbian and gay. That's how long ago it was. We were only having them chant lesbian and gay.
Right.
But it was 30 years ago.
Debra Chasnoff, a great loss to the
community. Died at 60 of breast cancer, a huge loss to her family. She leaves a partner and 2 sons.
Right.
And she was a terrific human being.
And all right, staying with the schools, and the Michigan School Board in Williamston, Michigan, took action to protect transgender students. They adopted a policy that affirms the privacy rights of all students.
Well, that's nice. All right.
Should we get into some atrocities from the administration?
Sure.
Maybe? Well, one of them is, Trump made a big deal. Oh, I'm not getting rid of the executive order on gays, although he's doing everything he can to undermine gay rights. But the General Services Administration has taken off the fact that sexual orientation and gender identity are protected in policy and have been for a long time. They're just not going to say it anymore on their website or in all those kinds of things.
Or in informing their employees who are protected by it.
Right.
And this tax bill, we'll see what happens with it. Again, with Rand Paul in the hospital and who knows what going on in the Senate after this election, we'll see whether the tax bill gets anywhere. But you know what's in the tax bill, aside from all its creepy tax elements?
Yes, I do. A repeal of the Johnson Amendment.
Yes. I wanted to surprise him with that.
Because I care about the Johnson Amendment. So here's what Johnson Amendment, it's Lyndon Johnson, isn't it?
Yes.
It was passed a long time ago to say, if you're a tax-exempt church, you can do issues, you can do things, but you can't do partisan politics. But there's 2 things that getting rid of it would do. So, yes, preachers would be able to get up on the pulpit and say, vote for so-and-so, which then they're not supposed to now, but many of them do.
Well, many candidates campaign in churches, including a lot of Democratic candidates.
Yes, but campaign in churches, but when the church devotes itself to electing someone, and that's the key. So what the Koch brothers or any of these other horrible people are going to be able to do now is they're going to be able to give money to these religious organizations if
tax-free.
Yeah, they get a tax benefit for doing it, and then the money can be used to undermine democracy.
By having the preachers become the shills for all the Koch brothers candidates and policies.
It is insane, and they're just slipping it into this tax bill. I mean, again, nothing is being done in the Congress where things get scrutinized and they have a hearing. Everything has to be rush.
Oh, there are no more hearings.
But they barely have them in the New York State legislature.
By the way, last week I was trying to pull out of my aged, addled brain, what it was that I'd read about Rudy Giuliani recently and his bad acts. And I remembered, it was in the New Yorker article about Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the makers of OxyContin, and the Sackler brothers, who lied relentlessly, that's my new favorite word, about the addictive properties of OxyContin. Lied to the federal government, said, oh, this isn't addictive, please approve this, please recommend it.
Who said yes?
The FDA.
When? Under who?
I don't know. I don't care. It's out there. But Rudy Giuliani was lobbying for Purdue Pharmaceuticals to get these drugs approved and lying about their addictive qualities.
While arresting hundreds of thousands of kids of color for low-level marijuana infractions.
Yeah. All right.
This is why we get very angry.
We do.
And then there's all, again, you know, you're sick of hearing this, but it's basically every nominee for the bench that Trump is putting up, every single one of them, one worse than the next. This guy, Stephen Grass, G-R-A-S-Z, the nominee to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, well, he referred to marriage equality as a grave danger, but in his hearing, he claimed he would follow the Obergefell decision as the law of the land. Yes,
Until he overturns it.
No, he doesn't have. No, he doesn't have to overturn it. He knows that when Trump gets a hold of the Supreme Court, they will overturn it. Lower level judges would have difficulty not following the precedent. The American Bar Association rated
Trump nominees difficulty following precedent, not following precedent.
This guy Graz, right?
Yeah.
He's only one of 2 nominees rated unqualified of all the Trump nominees. That's how bad he is.
Wow.
And then there's this guy, Gregory Katsas. This was probably the worst because he's the one who's been picking all these other judges, and now they want him to be a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, a very important seat. And he has an enormous anti-LGBT record, an enormous anti-women record. I mean, I have all these things. I mean, it's so bad. Look the guy up, K-A-T-S-A-S. I mean, I'm so horrified to read this record, and he's up. And the thing is, none of the Republican so-called moderates are stopping this.
Nor are the Democrats standing up on their, well, I guess some of them are objecting.
Votes.
This is why we have to start by defeating Roy Moore in this special election in December. We have to take a senator away from the Republicans.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
But we are a nonpartisan show. This is all about issues.
That's what we're talking about here.
Yes.
We're talking about what's going to happen to your rights when these judges become a majority.
Exactly. If the Republicans were supporting our rights, we would be supporting them.
And, you know, we look back at some of the Reagan appointments, some of the Bush appointments. By comparison, not so bad.
Paradise. All right. Well, it's time to move on to some terrible, again, news about violence around the country. Macon, Georgia, Candace Towns, a trans woman, 30 years old, murdered.
A 25th reported killing of a transgender person in the United States this year. And then in Henderson, which is outside of Las Vegas, a kid called Giovanni Melton, 14 years old, shot and killed by his father for being gay. This is a kid who was basically raised by his grandmother, who was practically living alone at this point, begging for food in the neighborhood and things like that. But the father was still living, so he hated the fact that the kid was gay and shot him to death.
And
he's been arrested.
Was it his grandmother who said he had been abused physically, mentally, and spiritually for many years? 14 years old.
And in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, a trans woman has filed a lawsuit because she was sexually abused while incarcerated with male inmates. There she is. Her name is
Jules Williams.
Yes.
And in Oswego County, New York, 2 brothers have been charged with assaulting a trans person, 19 years old, just randomly on the street, driving by, stopping, going back, assaulting.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to read one of the quotes from that Jules Williams situation in prison, where one of the guards said, when she was trying to get help, screaming for help, you know, I have 2 other guys here I have to answer to, and I can't stop and answer your questions. You're going to have to grow up and suck it up. This is what the guard said. Well, this
was that the accent he used?
Well, I'm interpreting. I'm doing a dramatic interpretation.
I understand. All right. In bad news from Louisiana, where a state appeals court has ruled that the governor of Louisiana cannot issue an executive order banning discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity for government workers and government contractors. The Attorney General had opposed the executive order. He's been in a fight with the governor over this for a long time. Now the question is, will the governor appeal this decision by the state court.
And then there's a kid named Michael Mansour, 21, at the University of Michigan, and he came out and his roommates started harassing him. They threw his belongings out the window, and so, you know, he tried to get action on this. They were saying things to him like, all gays go to hell. And the school wanted, yes, University of Michigan, and they wanted him to move. And he said, no, I live here, you know, make them move, for God's sakes. So he got an order of protection from one of the roommates who was ordered to leave, but he doesn't want to leave himself.
In Phoenix, Arizona, a charter school, Veritas, has rules against trans students using bathrooms contrary to their birth gender or wearing clothes similarly. And so they have very strict bans on this. Well, the students of the school, their parents, and alumni have been protesting this and have been standing up for the trans students. No change in the policy yet, but a great incident of support for the trans kids.
So what do you think about the Harvey Milk Memorial out in San Francisco? They want to redo the whole plaza. They're going to build some stairs there, which are going to have history things about Harvey. Given the fact that the crash is coming, they may want to save the money for something like human services. I mean, Harvey should be remembered, and it's been Harvey Milk Plaza for a long time, and Gilbert Baker's rainbow flag has flown there for a long time, and that's going to stay there. But
I was confused by it at first, but then on seeing some pictures from different angles, I realized that the ramp up is on top of the entrance to a subway station, so there's a reason for it to be elevated. They also say that they want it to be a gathering place for rallies and organizing.
It looks like the set of stairs in Times Square when you go there.
Yes.
Or Duffy Square, actually, to be precise.
I don't quite get the orange, but there may be a reason for that. I'm in favor.
That's to entice the president to support it, since he's an orange man.
And a fond farewell to Robbie Rogers, the star soccer player with the LA Galaxy. Yeah. He's retiring at 30. He's been out for the last year, injured. He was...
and he's been out of the closet longer than that.
Exactly. And we celebrated his coming out as a Major League Soccer player. And we're sorry to see him go.
But we're not sorry to see Kevin Spacey go.
Nope.
So, again, this all started 30-something years ago, but and the story that came out last week was that Anthony Rapp, the actor, gay actor, so sick of seeing Spacey continue to abuse people, spoke out and said he tried to, got on top of me when I was 14 years old, cornered me in his bedroom, etc. And this was horrifying to people, and I wrote at the time that he was finished, that he will never work again. And people said, oh, but this is something that happened 30 years ago. What are you talking about?
And it was one drunken episode.
Oh, yeah. And I said, no, it's been going on for years. People have been telling me over the years everything that happened. And I said, when a star loses power, that's when people can come out, as with Harvey Weinstein, as with Bill Cosby, as with all of them. So now all these people have come up. When Spacey was working as the director of the Old Vic Theatre in London for 11 years. Did a nice job artistically, but he would go to the bar there all the time and just grab young men. See, this isn't about flirting with people or being gay, which Spacey never admitted until now. It's about sexually harassing people in a horrible, obnoxious way. So and then of course at Netflix,
House of Cards. 8
people, filing complaints there. It just went on. It was just his MO all the time.
And yes, so now I understand, and I think you're right.
Well,
but there's
another boy came forward who said, another guy came forward in his 40s who said he had a sexual relationship with me when I was 14, and he tried to rape me when I was 15, and that's the last time I saw him.
So one thing that has mystified me about all these stories, starting with Harvey Weinstein and all these cases that we're now talking about, whether it's the British Parliament or Hollywood or politics or whatever, is that these guys keep denying it. They keep saying, I never engaged in anything that wasn't consensual.
Well, that's what Weinstein keeps saying.
Well, there are a lot of others who are saying this too. I never did anything that wasn't consensual. People are now being charged with rape, they're being sued, and they keep saying, I never did anything that wasn't consensual. So I've been trying to figure this out, and a couple of things. One, the stories are often about people who were raped, were assaulted, but didn't feel powerful enough to get away at that moment.
And with these people, they thought their careers would be over. And it's also always hard to come forward.
This is not, absolutely, I'm not blaming the victim, but what I'm saying is that the attackers, in their own twisted minds, interpret this for themselves as consent.
Yeah, you know, when you're a big star, they let you do it.
Exactly.
Which is the quote from our predator-in-chief, the President of the United States.
David Brooks, op-ed columnist for the New York Times, who I don't like at all. He's not very bright and quite conservative. But he took on this subject, and he talked about different levels of attack, relationship, whatever. And he said, you know, one key element in any relationship is how well you see the other person. In the first group, people see each other deeply. In the second group, they see each other in a degraded way. In the third group, the harasser doesn't see his victim at all. The men who have recently been exposed say they had no idea how much pain they were causing. And I believe that these guys really have the most distorted vision of what they're doing.
If Harvey Weinstein,
I'm not excusing them.
No. But if Harvey Weinstein didn't have any idea how much pain he was causing, why was he hiring Israeli Defense Force Mossad agents to investigate them and trash these women?
Well, that was once he found out that these stories were coming
Congratulations to Ronan Farrow, whatever your sexuality is. You're writing some great stories in The New Yorker about this.
Yes,
absolutely.
and I think the Times has done a great job.
You know, there was an editor at Variety magazine, Variety newspaper. He said there've been scandals in Hollywood since the silent movie age, but it was
Fatty Arbuckle.
He said it was one person or one incident. I don't know if Fatty was guilty, but anyway, but it was one person or one incident. I've been at Variety for 30 years. I have never seen anything like this. But what you're seeing is the success of the women's movement, finally, which has been lobbying about this to bring this out for decades.
I don't believe assault has changed. This is just finally ripping the cover off.
And it is a tipping point, and it's going to put everybody on notice, and everybody's shaking in their boots who's done this stuff. So. A lot of people are losing their esteem and their jobs. And so I think it's going to give everybody who has done this stuff, who has ever thought about doing this stuff, pause and make them stop.
Well, if they understand what they're doing. On the grounds of what I was just talking about, they may really still not understand what they're doing.
Well, Bill Cosby didn't know when he was drugging people.
Well, I'm not trying to make a blanket statement.
I hear what you're saying. It's obvious. Maybe that's the only way they can get through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, obviously, Kevin Spacey didn't think of gay people as people. I mean, because he could never embrace his own identity.
Okay.
All right. Let's
international news?
Well, so so in Australia, the postal plebiscite is finished, but we're not going to know the results until November the 15th.
But as we told you, the right wing is gearing up to fight the expected bill to legalize same-sex marriage by proposing scores of amendments that would undermine it.
And the question is, what will happen with those amendments? I don't think the Senate over there is going to go along with those amendments.
I certainly hope not.
Because they're the ones who stopped a public referendum on this thing. But there was a study by the people who predicted Trump was going to win that say that this could be a lot closer than people think. Almost 80% of the eligible voters voted. 78.5% of the voting populace of Australia participated.
There are predictions each way. It could win or lose. And we told you last week that Russia and Egypt were trying to get a non-discrimination clause out of the Olympic truce.
Yes.
To my great shock and amazement, the U.S., our people, plus France and Brazil, have stopped that effort, have stop them from putting that amendment in the Olympic truce. But the truce itself comes up for a vote next week on November 13th, so we'll see whether the clean with the non-discrimination clause truce gets passed.
Well, and wonder of wonders, staying over in that part of the world, a Russian human rights ombudsperson, an official there, Tatiana Moskalkova, told reporters that a criminal case could be made about what's going on in Chechnya, especially against the man Maxim Lupanov. So, you know, there's some bare movement, over there on this horrible persecution that's been going on there.
Well, I guess we should also take as a small ray of light that in Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, a soccer player wore, I think we told you about this when it happened, wore a rainbow armband for support of LGBT rights. And 8 right-wing protesters who tried to attack him recently have been arrested.
They were shouting anti-gay slogans while letting off flares and smoke bombs, and they burned a rainbow flag. They have no respect for the flag.
But the fun news comes from Africa.
But by the way, in that situation, the Georgia president supported Kasia, and he says everyone has a right to freedom of expression. We should respect human beings and liberties, so that's good. And
actually, let me go to Uganda first. A famous female rapper named Kiko, K-E-K-O, I assume that's it.
There she is.
She moved to Canada, and she has come out as a lesbian.
She feels free.
I want to use the actual quote. My gay ass is free. Now, she's very, very famous and popular in Uganda. She's sponsored by Pepsi and Mountain Dew.
Well, I hope it will change things.
She was named the Female Artist of the Year last year at the Ugandan Hip Hop Awards.
Because attitudes over there can be problematic.
Yes.
I mean, in Kenya, there was a photographer who found a picture of some gay lions lying with each other in an embrace, and he put this out there. But
actually being sexually active with each other.
And that's not the news.
Those are 2 male lions.
That's not the news, because we've seen this every species and everything. But the guy.
There are books written about homosexuality among animals.
The guy who's head of the Kenya Film Classification Board said, these animals need counseling because they probably have been influenced by gays who have gone to national parks and behaved badly. I know they haven't, he says, I don't know, they must have copied it somewhere, or it is demonic, because these animals do not watch movies. It went on and on and on. I mean, I'm worried that this guy's going to try to kill these lions over this thing.
Well, is this why gay men get arrested for cruising in parks in the United States, because they're going to warp the squirrels?
I guess.
It's terrible. Also, in reading all about the Kenya lions, I heard a story that I hadn't heard before, which was about the gay polar bears in San Diego at the zoo. They got separated. They sent one off to Pittsburgh, and the one who stayed in San Diego died of a broken heart.
Oh, damn it.
Terrible.
Damn it.
They'd been together for 20 years.
Did we talk about what Bermuda is doing?
Lesbian polar bears,
Did we already talk about what happened with Bermuda?
No.
They've unveiled a domestic... Now, they have same-sex marriage. They were court-ordered to do it, but they've unveiled a domestic partners bill, and they say, if you already got married, you can still be married, but we want to give you less rights.
But we want to make domestic partnerships available for all couples, straight or gay.
Well,
but this is just, you know, the court ruled that they had to make marriage open to all. Same-sex couples have been getting married in Bermuda, and the right wing is just desperate, and they're just throwing everything at it to try to stop it. But I suspect they will not win.
Very nice.
Hong Kong, which we told you last week has been awarded the Gay Games for 2022,
kind of mystifying.
but as part of mainland China now has some very repressive policies going on, will appeal the ruling there that recognized the lesbian couple for benefits.
And the government didn't express no enthusiasm for having the gay games there.
No, but I'm hoping that as the process, I'm in favor of taking the gay games to places that need a little education and liberalization, having been part of the Gay Games organizing for '94 in New York and seeing that it really had a major effect on New York, even at that time. You bring tens of thousands of celebrating gay people to a city, and it's going to have an effect.
Yes, there were right-wingers who tried to stop the Gay Games because they said it was going to bring AIDS to New York. I mean,
Ruben Diaz.
Yes, exactly.
So,
who was just elected to the city council in New York, a right-wing Pentecostal preacher.
So I'm hoping the Gay Games will have a good effect on Hong Kong, but meanwhile, there are issues. Right. And back to Kenya, the government has banned showing of the Disney TV show Andy Mack now that they are incorporating a gay theme.
Any attempt to introduce gay programming in Kenya will be met with the full force of the law.
I don't think those lions are going to get a TV show.
And what are we going to get out of the Congress in terms of health care? We're all in the period, or those of us who are on the Affordable Care Act, of trying to reapply, and that's daunting. But Bernie Sanders points out that Congress did not renew the funding for the Community Health Center program at the end of the fiscal year. Community health centers, I mean, there are thousands of them across the country. This is where people get their health care.
And they've been touted as, places that are alternatives to Planned Parenthood.
Yes. Boy, we just want everybody to die. On the other hand, at Notre Dame University, employees and likely students are going to retain their access to cost-free birth control through third-party insurers. There's a little kerfuffle about this, but they're going to be able to do it. Okay.
Another death to mourn, Joan Tisch, 90 years old, long, full life, a philanthropist who got very involved with AIDS activism.
A billionaire. And, Joan just showed up at the, very sparse GMHC headquarters, which was a very tiny place in those days, just said, I'm Joan and I'd like to volunteer. She didn't tell people who she was. At one point, she heard they needed a new copy machine, and the guy running the office said, we can't afford it. She said, here's a check for $425. And the guy says, is this check good? She said, well, she's worth billions. And they didn't know this, though. She just unassumedly, went into this. Eventually, they talked her into getting on the board, and she was very involved, and she was worth $4 billion. And she underwrote the Gay Men's Health Crisis purchase of a new headquarters on West 33rd Street entirely.
She was married into the Tisch family that owns the New York Giants football team and a lot of real estate things, but she was an enormously dedicated volunteer.
I mean, she did very basic volunteering. I mean, stuffing envelopes, helping people who were sick, all that kind of stuff. And they were like Judy Peabody.
Yes, and of course, some of our favorite volunteers are the activists who've been working on these issues for decades now, as the epidemic goes on. And at the Doc NYC Documentary Film Festival this weekend in New York, one of their prominent movies is called Nothing Without Us, The Women Who Will End AIDS, about the women involved in AIDS activism. And we have a clip from that movie that we would like to show you.
Scientists at the National Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta today released the results of a study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
The scientists say they are dealing with some new deadly sexually transmitted disease.
The perception early on was that it was a disease that was only affecting gay white men, which was completely and totally inaccurate.
Women were dying faster. Women were sick and still being ostracized and isolated without the benefit of women-specific resources and support.
There was a saying kind of in the early days of the epidemic, women don't get AIDS, we just die from it. That perception continues to be true.
The people who could afford drugs were getting them from Europe and from the US, and it was just ridiculously expensive.
I think because the impact of how this epidemic has hit certain particular groups that are considered
Do you call it racism?
outcasts. Racism, classism, sexism, you name it, any of the isms that you could think of.
Mon expérience est partie des femmes. Je me suis battue parce que ma révolte a été la révolte du nerf.
Change your definition, murder by omission. Change your definition, murder by omission.
Well, the average person who goes to church believes that they're exempt from HIV. They think they can pray it away. And I am a living testimony that prayer doesn't stop you from becoming infected.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are fighting for our lives. 6, 7, 8.
In this country, we're almost 30% of this epidemic. Worldwide, we're 50% of the epidemic. Maybe a little more. Yet, what you hear about women is almost zero.
For everything that the men have done to forge the fight on this epidemic, to open the door, it will be the women who close the door on this epidemic. I am not confused about that at all.
Women will end AIDS, and that film is going to be shown at the Documentary Film Festival on Friday at 10:30 and Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and Saturday at 9:15 p.m. And there are other films to see there.
You can get the whole schedule at DocNYC, docnyc.net. The festival is on from November 9th through 16th. Also in it is Rebels on Point. I mentioned last week about the Ballet de Trocadero, which is also opening theatrically in New York on November 15th and in LA on the 24th. Also, there are a lot of sort of fashion documentaries in this festival. Antonio Lopez, 1970, Sex, Fashion, and Disco. Documentaries about Kevin Aucoin, Cecil Beaton, Todrick Hall, the former American Idol contestant, and also one about Lorraine Hansberry.
Oh.
But that's going to be on PBS next year too.
They just put up a plaque to her in one of her places where she lived in New York.
Doc NYC, a cornucopia of documentaries.
Well, we saw a gay-ish play this week. M. Butterfly was revived. Now, this was done in 1988 with John Lithgow and B.D. Wong, and it ran for almost 2 years. It was very compelling. Now you've got Clive Owen and Jin Ha, and it just was not very compelling, I didn't think.
Well, you can guess
it's lost
that
a lot of its shock value.
You can guess that I only saw half of it, but it's because I found it kind of empty and cheesy.
And it was trying to be more explicit about how a man could go out with another man marry and not understand that this was a man. That's the plot, basically.
Cross-dressed. Well, if you want to see something a little more progressive in that area, there is a documentary that's going to be released next week on video on demand and DVD and Blu-ray that won the Audience Award at the 2017 South by Southwest Festival. It's called Divine Divas. It is a documentary from Brazil, a reunion of the first generation of transvestite performers. Singers, dancers, comedians, made by an actress whose grandfather owned a theater where they performed. And it's interesting. I found it a little too long, but it's a great group of people. Some now living as women, some now living as men, but clearly self-described as transvestite performers. Divine Divas is the name of it.
On Broadway, Anastasia, the musical, they're welcoming Max von Essen, the out gay actor, to play the role of Gleb, which is kind of one of the heavies there in the thing, on December the 5th.
And are you looking forward to the new production of Boys in the Band next year?
Am I looking forward to it? I saw that movie a lot when I was a kid, when I was underage. It was hard to get into an R-rated movie. So
I saw the Road Company when I was in college.
It was a play. It opened before Stonewall, I believe.
68.
Right.
68.
And but do we need a big production of the Boys in the Band again?
With Matt Bomer, Zachary Quinto, Jim Parsons, and Andrew Rattles.
Cast. I'll be curious to see what they do. They're great actors.
I think if they'd rewrite it, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not an appealing script.
No, it's about self-hating gay people,
exactly.
basically. That's even a line in the play. If only we didn't hate ourselves so much.
Come on, can't we get something newer? And we went to Lincoln Center to see a play.
Junk. We saw Junk. This is a play basically about Michael Milliken, although they call him something else. He was that junk bond guy on Wall Street who ended up in prison. Stephen Pasquale plays him, and he's pretty good in the lead, but it just doesn't tell us anything we don't know. This is by Ayad Akhtar. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Disgraced on Broadway. And I just, even though it's a lively play and there's a lot of information about how the awful stuff that goes on Wall Street, it's like, we know this.
It's a fascinating subject, but we do know it. And again, I didn't feel a need to stick around for the second act to find out what I already knew.
I told you what happened.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you.
I read Michael Lewis books about Wall Street. I like the Madoff movies. I am compelled by this. But
hey, we have a couple of minutes. Should we show the film or no? You want to talk? You want to chat?
No, go ahead. Show.
Well, I want to just get you ready for 2018, and I'm going to show you how hard it is to make things happen in politics. In New York, we are up against something that we're going to tell you about in a video that we're going to run right now about who controls the New York legislature.
Democrats in the Senate who vote with the Republicans in our attempt to get rid of them.
Hi, I'm Edie Falco. After the 2016 election, New York State acted fast to pass these measures to resist Trump's agenda. Universal single-payer health care, fully funded public schools, strong environmental safeguards, and sanctuary state legislation to protect all immigrants. Just kidding. That didn't happen. But it could have, and it probably would have if not for the Independent Democratic Conference. New Yorkers routinely vote Democrat at both state and national levels, and there is currently a majority of Democrats in the state Senate. But since 2011, a small group of so-called Democratic senators called the Independent Democratic Conference have refused to caucus with the Democrats, handing control of the Senate to Republicans. They do this in exchange for what they call Lulus, bigger salaries, nicer offices, and committee chairmanships. In fact, some IDC members are literally getting paid by the Republican Senate leadership in legally questionable ways that are making headlines in both local and national press. IDC members also get tons of campaign money from real estate, charter school, and healthcare lobbyists, some of whom are Republicans with connections to Trump. IDC members say that they're getting things done, but because they hand Senate control to Republicans, hardly any progressive legislation comes up for a vote. And when it does, it is heavily watered down, like the 2013 minimum wage law. You remember all those awesome things from the beginning? They have all passed the Assembly in the last 2 years, but thanks to the IDC, they were all blocked by the Senate. IDC members insist that the fault really lies with another rogue Democrat who votes with Republicans. The truth is they are both at fault, and they use each other as scapegoats to shift blame for their treason against the people who voted for them. Are you pissed off yet? Great, let's fight back. If we can raise enough awareness in these 8 IDC districts, we can vote the fake Dems out, making New York a real blue state, like California, and inspiring other states of the Union to resist Trump too. So share this video widely. Find out if your state senator is in the IDC, and join one of these groups to help us fight back.
So it's a tough fight in New York because we have traitorous Democrats here.
And possibly in the U.S. Senate, we have to worry about that. And I just want to appreciate my old art history professor, Linda Nochlin, who died a week ago, who was a fabulous role model for being a revolutionary and had a great influence on me. She was the first feminist art historian and a fantastic human being.
Thank you for being with us.